Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I am here today visiting GIGN outside of Paris by their generous invitation, and we are taking a look at the current standard issue rifle of the GIGN Intervention Force, and that is the CZ Bren 2 short-barreled in 7.62 by 39 millimeter. This is a gun that I think everyone who's aware of its choice has always kind of wondered, what was the thought process behind this rifle? What's its intention? And I'm very excited today to be able to share all of that with you. So as a little bit of an introduction, for those of you who aren't familiar with GIGN, this is essentially France's top tier special, not so much military special forces, but counterterrorism, hostage rescue, elite police intervention unit. So you could compare them to someone like the FBI's hostage rescue team. They are a member of the Gendarmerie, which is a military branch, not a police organization, but it's a sort of organization that doesn't really have a parallel in the United States. It's really sort of a hybrid between military and police, but falls into the military organization and military command structure. Anyway, GIGN is a relatively small organization it's self-contained and set up to be able to address basically any sort of emergency terrorist or serious criminal situation. So when you have terrorist attacks in Paris in 2015, it is largely well, everyone responded to that, but GIGN was one of the core elements that responded to that attack. And they respond to incidents not just in mainland France, but also in French ex-colonial territories, French protectorates around the world, as well as working in partnership with other international forces, whether they are another country's domestic force that needs GIGN's special expertise and skill set, or peer forces like the United States or other Western European countries that want to collaborate and cooperate with GIGN. So in 2015, the force was using the HK416 as its primary rifle in 5.56. And the end result of a number of operations was the decision that they wanted a cartridge that had better terminal stopping power. There were a couple of incidents, both terror attacks in France and also operations in the Sahel in North Africa, where GIGN operators came away really underimpressed by the stopping power of 5.56. On top of this, the 416 had some downsides specifically for the sort of operations that GIGN needed it for. Because they are counter to violent crime, counter-terrorism, they're often operating in a very covert sort of nature. They need to be able to approach a target without attracting attention, which often means carrying guns in bags. Having a compact weapon is a real tangible benefit to the organization. They were using 416s with 14.5-inch barrels and, of course, non-folding stocks, and that led to some difficult operations. So in 2015, they decided we need to have our own specialized rifle. We're a special unit, and we need to have a special rifle to go along with it. And they started investigating different options. And the caliber that pretty quickly came to the front as their best choice was 7.62 by 39, specifically because it could have better terminal performance and less over-penetration. GIGN often operates in close, highly congested areas, inside apartment buildings, in public city areas, that sort of thing. So what they did was they started experimenting with different projectile designs that could be used in 7.62 by 39. And ultimately what they came to choose was the Nosler V-Armageddon. It's got a couple of them right here. Essentially hollow point expanding ammunition that offered maximum terminal performance. Like they would open up immediately upon hitting a target, but then wouldn't over-penetrate. So this ammunition goes through less, for example, interior drywall layers than 9mm hollow point pistol ammunition does. In addition, this was a cartridge that could be found basically anywhere in the world, and GIGN does deploy globally. And they had issues with not necessarily being able to source ammunition, having to get it from partner forces on operations. Well, 7.62 by 39 is available anywhere. It might not be the special, Nosler fancy ammunition, but you can get ex-Soviet block M43 ball ammo basically anywhere that an organization like this is going to be operating. So that was a big plus for them as well. I think a lot of people look at this rifle and ask, why not 300 Blackout? Well, a couple of reasons. 300 Blackout was just kind of coming into its own in 2015. 300 Blackout is still not particularly available worldwide and definitely wasn't back then. People also make the assumption that 7.62 by 39 was chosen because it allowed a subsonic suppressed loading and version of the cartridge. That really was not the intention, not the main goal for GIGN here, and that is what 300 Blackout is primarily designed for. So if you want maximum terminal performance in a very compact carbine and you have the option to have whatever bullet design you want, 7.62 by 39 actually can make a lot of good sense. The guns that they chose it's a 9-inch barrel. I know people are gonna be like, well, why not 308? Well, the answer is you cut 308 down to a 9-inch barrel, you're getting pretty perilously close to just having 7.62 by 39 ballistics anyway. You might as well stick with the smaller cartridge, the smaller format gun, and get basically the same thing. So 2015, they kind of decide on the cartridge. In 2016, they're testing different rifles, and there frankly aren't a whole lot of options out there. They actually go to CZ investigating the VZ58 family of rifles, and CZ hears about this and says, well, you know, we've got this Bren 2 that we're developing in 7.62 by 39 already. Maybe this would be of more interest to you than something that's 50 years old. CZ had developed the Bren 80. So the new Bren series starts with the 805 in 5.56, and then CZ adds in the Bren 807 variation, which is in 7.62 by 39. Specifically, well, they wanted to sell a whole ton of them to India and also potential sales to other countries that had legacy arms, AKs, in 7.62 by 39 and wanted a modern gun using the same ammunition. So CZ puts in the level of R&D and reliability testing to actually truly develop a reliable, like a multi-environment, truly military reliable system in 7.62 by 39, which is something that very few other rifles in that caliber have. There are a lot of AR conversions to 7.62 by 39, and the French, the GIGN, did look at several of those, but none of them have the fine tuning to the point that the CZ Bren 2 did. In addition, of course, the Bren 2 allows a folding stock. 9-inch barrel folding stock makes this a very compact little weapon. So in 2017, this was formally chosen as the new standard GIGN Assaulters rifle. They purchased all of 68 of them. That was supplemented a year or two later, I think, by a small number of additional ones, but that's pretty much enough to fully equip the GIGN frontline assaulter force. So let's take a closer look. Let me talk about what all of the accessories on these things are, because that's also a very interesting part of this story. All right, one of the cool things about GIGN is that the operators here have an incredibly high level of trust and autonomy within their units, and they essentially have the freedom to set up their rifles in whatever way they choose. So when looking at an assortment of GIGN Bren 2s, you will see an assortment of all sorts of accessories and configurations. And this one is particularly cool and salty, shall we say. So it has been camo painted a while ago. That paint is fairly heavily worn. The original optic that was procured with these rifles was, in fact, this 4-power ACOG with an interesting proprietary reticle. It is a range-finding reticle that was specifically chosen so that it could be used to measure not so much targets, but things like windows and doorways for scale, for size, so that other operations could take place. Like, we have a truck with a ladder coming in to access this second floor window. We need to know how high it is or how wide is the window. Well, an assaulter across the street, for example, can use the mill system in their reticle to measure something like that. Because this is a fixed 4-power magnification, they had Trijicon RMR red dots on top to allow quick unmagnified no eye box use. They did use suppressors, although there isn't one on here. The original procured suppressor was actually a Finnish Ase Utra suppressor, although you'll see, again, a variety of different ones in use. In fact, if we take a look at that black one that you saw earlier in the video, this has a BNT Rotex on it with a Manta heat cover. Then it's also important, of course, to have equipment for use in low light, and that might mean using visible light. We've got a stream light on this particular one. Might also mean infrared use with night vision goggles if you're in a smoky environment, if you're in a nighttime environment. The use of either a visible or infrared laser could be called for. And so I believe the original procurement was for B.E. Meyer's Malls, and that's what this guy has on there under that paint. And then like tape switches to run all of these things, and the way that the wires are routed, you know, whether the lights are set up on the handguard itself or down here, like all of that stuff is totally up to the individual operator to set up. So this is one pretty cool example here. Oh, and one last thing I forgot to note. These were equipped with Bren BR stocks. Those have a slightly higher cheek rest, although this particular fellow has chosen to just remove the cheek rest to make the gun a little more compatible with a gas mask or armored visor. Rather than set it up with like a specialty visor stock, you just pull the cheek rest off and that works. Here is a different example. This one is in a little bit closer to stock configuration. You can see this is the actual Bren 2 BR original stock. There are a few differences mechanically and aesthetically between the GIGN contract guns and just a standard CZ Bren 2. One of those changes is that the guns were Cerakoted OD green from the factory. And on that first gun, it is there, that color's there under all the paint. Here, you can see the actual original coloring. By the way, one of the other changes, they were given titanium firing pins, and that was for a couple reasons. One was to allow better use with a wide variety of different types of ammunition, including corrosive surplus ammunition. It was also important for the so-called over-the-beach capability of the rifle, the ability to shoot from immediately coming out of immersion in water. One of GIGN's specialties is combat diving, and they have guys who will carry these underwater, and they want the ability to fire immediately as they break the water's surface. So the Bren 2 will do that, and the titanium firing pin helps. The other thing that CZ did on these was put a fair amount of work into tuning the gas system so that they could run reliably in full auto with subsonic ammunition, which is something that hadn't really been a requirement of any of CZ's previous 7.62x39 iterations of the gun. You know, most times the caliber was there, you know, these guns were there to equip guys who used to have AKs, and subsonic ammunition and suppressors just weren't even in consideration. For GIGN, suppressors are relevant. They do have some silent operations groups that did want the ability to use subsonic ammunition with suppressors, but then they also just wanted the ability to mount a suppressor so that when guys are shooting in a stack, you're not touching off 7.62x39 out of a 9-inch barrel 2 inches away from the guy in the front ear. Putting a suppressor on the gun there was more about concussion and blast than it was trying to make the gun quiet or silent. So the gas piston is 3-position. It's essentially standard, subsonic, and off. And then here we have actually a Holosun laser. They've got a couple batches of the new Holosun infrared laser modules that they're using. They're cheaper than B.E. Meyer's Malls, and apparently they're working quite well for GIGN, which is cool. That was a bit of a surprise for me to see. And then this particular operator has chosen to go with a newer model EOTech with a flip-down magnifier mount on it. You'll also see these guns running various flavors of aim point as well, but I thought this would be a pretty good comparison. So, you know, maybe you're running an EOTech and a magnifier with a Holosun laser. Maybe you're running an ACOG with a stacked RMR and a B.E. Meyer's Mall. It's really up to the individual operator. The magazines are not AK magazines. Of course, these are the proprietary Bren 2 magazine in 7.62 by 39, which allows them to be workable in a straight-walled magazine well like this. And then here is an example of that Hornady V-Armageddon bullet. So they have Hornady's sort of plastic soft tip there that fills up the hollow point opening of the bullet. This ensures that the hollow point doesn't get filled with something like clothing or drywall, so that it will reliably expand no matter what it hits. And that's the ammunition that they are using as standard, although of course the guns are capable of running on any other 7.62 by 39, from old surplus corrosive Comblock M43 up to, hand-loaded heavy bullet subsonic. All right, I'll bring this one back just for a moment. This is a little bit more of a standard CZ Bren 2. This has the standard Bren 2 stock instead of the BR stock. I think this is probably one of the initial sample guns that GIGN got. It's currently on display in their unit museum here on base. And just judging from the fact that it's got the ACOG screws here on the same side as the charging handle, I'm pretty sure this particular one never went into the field with anybody. But it's a good example of showing kind of what a very stock Bren 2 looks like in this configuration. The CZ Bren 2 in 7.62 by 39 remains the standard primary rifle for GIGN operators today. Now, these are guys who have a lot of cross-trained specialties, and they have a lot of other equipment at their disposal for more specialized requirements. If they need a submachine gun, they've got MP5s available. Of course, they have pistols. If they need a medium-range shot, they may choose to take a medium-length 308 AR carbine. They have serious sniper rifles. They have Accuracy Internationals in 308 and 338 if they need truly long-range capability. But the standard initial rifle, the basic choice, is this guy still today. Now, if there is one particular place that this doesn't meet all of its expectations, it would be the intermediate and long-range shooting, and it's not so much because of the gun, it's because of the caliber. 7.62 by 39 does really well within about 200 yards, but if they had the opportunity to have anything whatsoever, I think the GIGN would prefer to have a rifle that is equally at home from 5 meters out to 600. And the 7.62 by 39 doesn't really get the far end of that spectrum. But of course, everything in firearms choice is a compromise, and what they do get with this is very good terminal performance, and I think that's probably more important and much more used much more often than long-range shots. For GIGN, the goal is to never have to shoot anybody, but if they do have to shoot someone, they want it to be as effective as possible immediately. They want one-shot stops every time, and expanding 7.62 by 39 does a really good job of that. So I would like to obviously give a big thanks to GIGN for giving me the opportunity to come here and film these rifles for you guys, and in particular, the two operators who let me borrow their guns to show you on camera. This is the one out of their unit museum, but the other two, this guy and the other one that you saw, are in fact on-duty operational rifles. So very, very cool to get a chance to take a look at something like that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.